All right, I'll call the November 8th regular council meeting to order. Do we have anybody registered for the open mic? Nobody online? Nobody wanted to speak. Okay. Looking for an adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Councilor Billingsley, one added agenda item is my running for vice president of AUMA. Was there anything else that we needed added? Go ahead, Sue.
Homelessness update, please.
So item 8C. Be my vice president nomination. And 8D will be homelessness update.
Yeah. I bought one from him. It turns out he's in Muscatine.
Anything further? As amended, ready for the question, those in favor? Carried. Item 4A, approval of the minutes.
I move that city council approve the organizational meeting, October 25th, 2021.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question, those in favor? Carried.
I move that city council approves the minutes of the regular council meeting, October 25th, 2021.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question, those in favor? Carried.
Oh my God.
We have two delegations. First one is Virginia Lehman. Good afternoon, Virginia. Sure, absolutely.
It's on the top. It's on the top, Virginia.
Thanks. Can you hear me now? I have been thinking of ideas for the last several years on ways to acknowledge my loved ones that have gone before me. This idea I have finally settled on, and it's a memorial forest, and I'm hoping it by the lake park. This forest, the trees, would be funded through donations. As you all know, success of a project happens when people work together. So I contacted our funeral homes, believing they could play a very important role. Jason and Murray liked the idea, and they have come with me today to give you their thoughts. I'll just switch places with you.
Welcome, Mr. Womble.
Greetings. I'm Jason from Baker Funeral Chapel. Over the last several years, we have had a tree program implemented through our website. It has gone over well. However, the problem with that program is that it works directly with Forestry, the Institute of Forestry's Canada. So nobody ever knows where these trees are being planted. They make a donation and trees are planted in someone's memory, but we as locals don't see it firsthand. Many years ago, one of our casket manufacturers had implemented a program that anybody who purchased a casket, they'd automatically plant a tree. But again, the same problem arose that nobody knew where these trees were going. Trees are just being planted. Several years after that, a funeral home in Calgary, McKinnis and Holloway, implemented their own tree program and worked with the city of Calgary to plant trees in specific parks. Families would know exactly where their trees were going, and they could go there to reflect or just a place to honor their loved ones. The feedback I've had from families is that they're wanting more and more to have something local, and we would be very willing to step up and help on a donation basis if this were implemented here in Wetaskiwin. And I think By the Lake Park would be a great spot for this tree program. So I would be completely in favor and be able to help out any way we could.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Rob.
Murray, I'm with Serenity Funeral Service. I'm not going to be as long as Jason because he said most of it. We talked about it where like you had tree planting places where, like you say, you don't know where the tree is. Doing it out at By the Lake Park, I think is a great idea because it's going to expand the park a little bit more and beautify the area more as well. You know, and along with the same lines as, you know, with the donation part, it's a good idea to do that because it's more personal for that person to plant that tree. And like I said, we're also, you know, willing for donation as well as donations and ideas that that we can help on as well too. So I think it would be a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a couple of other people that I contacted. It was Barb and Don Forster. They used to have a tree business here in just outside of Wetaskiwin. The intent of that call was to find out how far apart various trees should be planted, because I really didn't know. Instead, what I got was Don Forster offering to do a plan for the idea absolutely free. I have part 2 of the project in my hands. I will give this to city administration. The part 1 is still in the planning stages where I'm proposing, and this is entirely up to city because it is city's property. It would be south of the parking lots. There's a whole empty section there. I would really appreciate if a member of council could support this initiative by making a motion to ask City of Wetaskiwin administration to gather more information on costs and in-kind time commitment and report back to council.
Is that your presentation? We'll wait until you're done, and if there's a
Okay,
motion to
I
follow up,
just,
then
and the end of that is I just want to thank you for letting me present today.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's no,
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that council proceed to ask administration to gather more information on the costs and in-kind time commitment and report back to council.
You have a date that they'll report back? You're probably not doing any tree planting in December, so I don't think that it's urgent, but
Yeah.
What kind of time do you need?
Could we get the second meeting in January? January 24th?
As long as that works for administration.
Moved by Councillor Elliott. Any discussion? Councillor Billingsley?
Virginia, so you said you had a map, so you're talking about the land that would be by from the road or the fence to the parking lot and then towards, I guess, the hill, I guess?
yeah, when you come into the entrance,
Yeah,
it's just on your left-hand side. That would be what I would propose as the first stage. This one is including this part 2, takes in, goes like this, and it takes in the Babbling Brook. I call it the Babbling Brook, and then up the hill a ways.
awesome.
Anything further? Should be on everyone's screen.
No, I thought she just said.
I'm just going to say that I'm willing to work towards finding funding wherever we can possibly get it. I mean, I will be talking to various people, including tree places. And so I'm willing to do lots of work on this.
Can we include in the motion, Councillor Elliott, just the communication between Virginia and city administration too, just so it's not just city administration doing the work without consulting with? Yes. Good, as amended. Ready for the question, those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 5B, Citizen of the Month, October 2021. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Entertain a motion? We need a motion. Yeah. Councillor Blatz.
I move that council recognize Scott Kaiba as Citizen of the Month for October 2021.
Moved by Councillor Blatz. Any discussion? Councillor Adelaide.
It's not really a discussion. It's just a thank you, Scott. And I think we both said it to you and to the public and everything, that you made parts of this election, which can be hard for those of us as we go into it, a little bit more fun and a little bit more relaxing. And we're very grateful. So thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Through as well, just to mention to Scott, and I think you're just a great ambassador for the city. You really are. And you put a little pressure on us as well, that we had to get our thoughts in line to get everything ready for you. And that was a good thing. But I just appreciate the way that you were such a relaxed interviewer and just made the city more aware. There were lots of people. What were there at 5 a.m? We were still all sitting there talking on election night, and you were still alert. I don't know if you made it to work the next day or not, but anyway, you did a wonderful job of informing the community and continue to do so through your R&R. So thank you very much, Scott.
Councillor Billingsley.
I too would like to thank you personally, Scott. And it certainly just isn't for what you did for the election, which I greatly appreciate. It's all the other things that you do in this community that I think that it's very important that the community understands and are made aware of your contributions. And as I said, it's greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you. We've talked numerous times, but the one thing that stands out for me is when I was out talking to folks in the community, how many were able to say, I didn't know anything about this particular candidate or that particular candidate, and I had the opportunity to find out more about them because of the work that you did. So I think as much as we talked about making the community aware, I think you brought the community together. And that's a huge accomplishment. And I tip my hat to you, Scott. Thank you so much.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you. Through the chair, Scott, I echo everything that's been said. And as Councillor Billingsley said, it wasn't just the election, it's everything you do. And what I like about it is pretty much everything you do is in a positive light. And that's what we need more of in this town. And so thank you again so much. And as you probably noticed, I'm not really good at online interviews, but we made it through. Oh, good. Can we mute his mic?
Oh, no, he's got free reign to speak. Councillor Blatz.
Yeah, echoing the rest of my co-councilors' comments, thank you for everything that you do. I think that in the past couple of years, there's been so much negativity and so much despair, just even with the COVID-19 pandemic. So having some positivity, having someone with a chicken hat show what's going on in our community is an absolutely wonderful asset to our community that a lot of communities don't have. And so what you do is incredible, and the amount of work and hours that went into all the interviews has been absolutely phenomenal. And you should be very proud of yourself, because everybody in the community is very proud of you.
And there's not much more I can say that council hasn't already talked about. Not only your work throughout the election, but the work that you do for the community itself, your online presence, and you've become a trusted source of information too, which is awfully refreshing when there's a whole lot of misinformation going on. I appreciate that you take the time to find out the information and then share that too, so that other people can be informed as well. I can't tell you how many times I know that you've reached out to either administration or council to get the information to make sure that you're sharing the accurate information. So for that, I definitely appreciate that. And of course, all of your updates with COVID and making sure the community is understands what's going on within our community is definitely an advocate and a huge feather in your cap, quite literally, for the work that you do. And knowing your family and knowing your parents for as long as I have, it's no surprise that you're definitely as valuable to the community as you are. So on behalf of council, I want to thank you very much.
You guys, right? Well, I got a congratulations on my phone, and there are other more stuff. Someone's texting me. All right. So, sorry, give me a second. With my parents here and my kids here, it feels like I'm getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. And Kevin, because what did I have written here? You have to hold my camera because your videos took the most time. And it's a payback. You can stay there.
Oh, okay.
You're supposed to point at him though.
Yeah, you just pointed at me. It'll capture it. I got my daughter behind you.
Oh, okay.
If you screw us up much as your interviews, it'll be
We can redo it again.
it'll be good later on. I'm gonna take my mask off because this is making my glasses fog up. You know, one word describes getting nominated for this award, and the word is wow. And wow also happens to be an acronym for Wetaskiwin's on weed, because nominating a chicken hat wearing YouTuber for a Citizen of the Month award is crazy to me. And if you want even more proof, 2 minutes before 4:20 today. And I think you scheduled that because in the agenda, that is right there. A few other stories. A week before election, I got a phone call from a local hair salon. And the owner said, you know, Scott, you're the talk of the hair salon. And I said, thank you. Or, oh my gosh, like, this is good or bad? Because usually when you're the talk of the hair salon and you're a grown man, it's usually not a good thing. So wow, again, wow, like amount of, like she had said that client after client had come in and she just felt obligated to phone me and tell me about the clients. And it was just very, very heartwarming that I got that. I've received cookies, pizza. I've received phone calls from strangers that I don't know. I've received private messages from dozens of people thanking me for what I did. I have thousands of comments on Facebook of appreciation. Blown away. Again, wow, like blown away. Usually I love making crazy videos. It was very difficult for me to be straight-faced and talk to you guys. And in the back of my head, believe me, I wanted to say stuff. I wanted to say stuff. And I think I edited a few parts out on occasion. I did as well, but I love to bring smiles and laughter to my neighbors and my community. And it warms my heart when I see other people having a laugh and smiling because of something that I've done. It brings me to tears. In fact, I wrote this down, so I wasn't going to be so emotional by trying to just cuff it out of my cuff. The motivation for me to make my videos this time was I felt that the issues in Wetaskiwin that we faced in a community needed to be heard. We need to get the citizens the information and the information from the candidates so they could make a really informed decision. I thought that was super important. And it was also to minimize the exposure to the candidates from COVID, because one-on-one conversations were so risky to do. And so that was another motivation for me. And when I thought about embarking on this project, I didn't expect 20 interviews. It was a heck of a long week. And scheduling them was very, very crazy. Right, Kevin?
Yes, it was.
Kevin and I had to schedule multiple reschedules and multiple videos. That's why he's holding the camera right now. From the faces I see sitting here today, I think Wetaskiwin has chosen very wisely, and I'm very happy to see all of you here, sitting here. And I want to personally congratulate all of you guys for getting onto council. I also want to I want to thank all the candidates as well. So I don't know where I looked for this, but guys who agreed to interview with me. I know just how hard it is to put yourself in front of camera and to speak to the world through a camera. And I'm so happy that you all did that for the community so they could get to know everybody that did that. Finally, in the book of Matthew, when the lawyer asked Jesus, "What's the greatest commandment?" Jesus replied, "Love your God with all your heart and soul. And secondly, love your neighbor as yourself." And this is a living example of what can happen when you spend some time and energy loving your neighbor. Thank you so much.
Councillor Nielsen.
And while you get all the accolades, I'd like to thank your family for allowing you to spend the kind of time you did doing this project as well. So thank you to you folks as well.
Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Scott. I would like to acknowledge that today is also National Indigenous Veterans Day. The Memorial Day observed in Canada in recognition of Aboriginal contributions to military service, particularly in the First and Second World Wars and the Korean War. It occurs annually on the 8th of November. The day was first commemorated in 1994. The special memorial was created because before 1994, Indigenous veterans were not recognized in Remembrance Day activities. Indigenous veterans had to overcome many obstacles to serve Canada in these wars, including adjusting to new cultures, sometimes learning to speak new languages, and traveling long distance to enlist. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement. Item 6A, Council Procedural Bylaw Approval.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the Council Procedural Bylaw. At the October 25th meeting, discussions and changes occurred. Those changes have been included into the bylaw, and we are seeking third reading this evening or any potential amendments.
I'll entertain a motion and then we can go through the bylaw.
I move that City Council gives third and final reading to Council Procedure Bylaw 2003-21.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion? We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Carried. Item 6B, Council Code of Conduct Bylaw Approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Similar to the previous bylaw, Council Code of Conduct Bylaw was reviewed on October 25th, and all of the requested changes have been incorporated into this bylaw. We are looking for final approval.
I will entertain a motion. Councillor Nielsen.
I move that City Council gives third and final reading to Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 2004-21.
Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Any discussion? Councillor Billingsley.
Just for house, well, I don't know if it's house cleaning, but item 5.1, it states communicating on behalf of the municipality. A member must not claim to speak on behalf of council unless authorized to do so. Who authorizes?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, the designated chair is always the mayor. In the absence, it would be the deputy mayor. If neither of those are around, it is the decision of council who is the next spokesperson.
Thank you.
Anything else? We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Carried. Item 6C, council boards and committees bylaw approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This bylaw was also brought forward on October 25th, and we are looking for third and final reading this evening. I do want to qualify, though, that we did create a template that Karen has or will be sending out to everyone. Karen and I have talked about making the committees, boards, updates the second meeting of the month. So if council is okay with that, we will include that into our iCompass process. And then that template will be sent around. We also just wanted to clarify and make sure that we are on the right page, that administration will be looking at all of the boards and committees within Schedule A and developing terms of reference if they are not there already. In some of those cases, it's other municipalities, so we'll be working with those municipalities to create those. We are looking for third and final reading.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I would move that city council give third and final reading to the council boards and committees bylaw 2005-21.
Moved by Councillor Elliott. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 6D, city manager bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Again, another bylaw that was first discussed at the October 25th meeting. There were a couple of questions related to the authorities of the city manager with respect to budget. So I did circulate earlier to council which sections are related to the MGA and which sections are related to city policy. And then as well, which pieces are industry best practice, just to add more transparency and clarity to the process. So we are open for any further comments on this bylaw and looking for either changes or a third reading.
Councillor Blatz.
I move that city council gives third and final reading to the city manager bylaw 2006-21.
Moved by Councillor Blatz. Any discussion? We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Carried. Well done, administration.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 7A, CAO update in a closed session. I will entertain a motion to go in camera under section 24. Councillor Billingsley. Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Can you do it again with your mic on, please?
I move that city council proceeds with the meeting in a closed session to discuss a matter which falls under section 24 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, exceptions to disclose.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Thanks again, Scott and family. Yeah.
I got muted.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Just through the chair to Kathy. So we could have multi-crosswalks in Wetaskiwin being multicolored, like the Boys and Girls Club would like to put one, but they want to wait till the road is better because it's kind of cracked and everything. But if the Legion wanted to put one and then we wanted to do one for Canada Day, we could make our community look quite pretty if we had different colored crosswalks, and that's okay.
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, if council so desired, we would absolutely make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through the chair to all of council, this is something that we've discussed several times as part of council, and I think what we could do as administration is just maybe advertise a little bit more about that. I know Parkside has also purchased paint and they're looking at a crosswalk. We had a lot of pushback that first year that Saga did, and we threw it out to the entire community. Anybody that wants to do a crosswalk is more than welcome to approach the city, meeting certain criteria, making sure that they meet the engineering standards. And then we would look at each one individually. So we'll do some more communication around that.
We've advertised that before.
So, Mr. Mayor, through to Sue, where you turn to go into our place off North Mountain Drive, there's a cement island. And some seniors who are going into that area, and there's most of them are, well, they're all seniors, have visual problems. Could we take it upon ourselves as a project to paint that island in a yellow or a bright color that would be acceptable to the city?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, we would need to look at that from an engineering safety, traffic safety perspective, but it's, I've seen it done in other communities, and so long as it's not distracting drivers, Kathy's team would have a look at it and just make sure that it's acceptable.
Thank you.
Councillor Nielsen.
Only to say that Parkside did buy paint, and we tried painting asphalt. And we put hundreds of dollars of paint down and got horrible results. So we wouldn't be painting asphalt again. It was a great idea on the surface, no pun intended.
Anything further? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 8B, restrictions exemption program.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mayor Gandam and members of council. So on September 27th, council voted in favor of implementing the restrictions exemption program at the Manlet Center and the Civic Center. At that same time, council approved $15,000 for private security to facilitate the program from October 4th to October 31st. To date, the REP has been going well. Check-in tables are located at the lobby of each facility, and the guards greet patrons and check for proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. Adults 18 plus are required to show proof of vaccination as well as ID if they are participating in an activity or if they are spectating. Youth between the ages of 12 and 17 are not required to show proof of vaccination if they're participating in an activity, but youth that are coming to the facilities as spectators are required to show proof or a negative COVID test. Children 11 and under are exempt from this program and not required to participate. So administration has contacted other municipalities in the region to see how they are managing the REP. Both the city of Camrose and the city of Leduc are planning to contract private security for as long as the REP is in place. So in order to continue the REP at the recreation facilities, administration requires additional funding of $65,000 for private security until February 28th, 2022. Administration will be adding an operating business case to the 2022 budget process for council to consider funding options for the REP for the remainder of 2022. So there are two alternate options for consideration. So number one, council could direct administration to hire temporary staff to facilitate checking in patrons at the facilities. Or number two, council could direct administration to utilize internal part-time recreation staff for the checks. So the implication section, the cost of continuing with private security at the Manlook Center and the Civic Center from November 8th to February 28th is $61,560. The risk of continuing the REP without private security poses a safety risk to recreation staff due to the controversy surrounding providing proof of vaccination to access public facilities. To date, the private security guards have dealt with a handful of incidents since the program started on the 4th of October. And at this time, I'd be happy to open up and take any questions that council may have.
I move that city council approves $65,000 for private security to continue operating the restrictions exemption program rep from November 8th, 2021 to February 28th, 2022 to be funded from the contingency reserve.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Can I offer a friendly amendment and say up to 65,000?
Yes, you can, sir.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Natasha. If the REP becomes non-existent, if the government does away with it, will we have that option clause in our contract to opt out then? If the government decides before February the 28th to say this is not required anymore.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Elliott, that's correct. So if the government decided to not go forward, then at that time we would terminate our contract for the private security.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, may I ask one more question?
Please, yeah.
I'm not trying to direct staff. I'm going to ask a question. Would it be possible that the security person could maybe wear the appropriate clothing to be recognizable as a security person? To have some, when I've seen the individual, excuse me, at the pool and at the arena, I walked in to watch a hockey game and I didn't even know what the individual was sitting there. And then somebody said, you got to check in with that person. So I just, when I went to Camrose, they actually they have a hat and they have a vest and everything else that says security. I just to make sure that the person is recognizable for what their position is. Thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Through the chair to Natasha. Excuse me. With the alternate options, we were presented to use internal part-time rec staff or staff in general. Did you do any calculations as far as what it would cost extra in staffing as opposed to using private security?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, yes, I did, based on the wages of our current part-time staff. So it would be cheaper, and I apologize, I don't have those numbers in front of me at home here. However, the risk, we felt it would be better to go with private security, just because a few of our staff have expressed concerns with being the ones to do the vaccination checks.
Thank you.
Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what the protocol is or if there is one. There's a motion on the floor. I was just wondering if we could split the motion into two separate motions, that's all.
You could offer an amendment.
That would change the entirety of the motion.
Correct. That's why it's an amendment, not a friendly amendment. So we would vote on the amendment.
Well, for the sake of conversation, yes, I would like to do an amendment. I would like to amend the motion to read that City Council approves $25,704 for private security to continue operating the restrictions exemption program at the Civic Center. And the reason is I would like to have a conversation about Manluck at least experimenting without having security there.
So your amendment would be to only have security operating under the Civic Center, and then it would be a second discussion to talk about the Manlock Center.
Yes.
Okay, to the amendment. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Sue, would there be any liability issues related to this if we didn't have anybody checking?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, we did have a discussion ahead of time talking about concerns of the Manluck staff. And so I think I'm not as worried about a liability from a public health perspective, but more a liability from our staffing perspective.
But Councillor Nielsen was saying, don't have anybody check, just let them come in.
Right, that's my
No,
concern.
No, I said, let's have somebody check the Civic Center.
Yes, but you said they can go into the Manluck.
No, I didn't say that at all.
He wants-
There's still potential for a second motion coming forward.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he
Okay.
just wants to have them split so that you can have discussion on the Civic Center, the
Oh,
Civic Building, the
oh,
Civic
I'm sorry.
Center, and the Manlock Center separately.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
My point.
Go ahead.
My point being that if you're prepared to spend up to $65,000 to ensure security at both facilities, I'm assuming you'd be prepared to spend $25,704 for security at the Civic Center.
It doesn't change the ability to have security at both locations. It's just being split up into two separate motions so we can talk about it separately. To the amendment.
Should be up to.
Is that okay? Is it friendly?
Natasha, are you okay with the, see any concerns with the motion as written?
No, I do not.
Anything else? Natasha, what? At the Civic Center, other than regular practices, what programs would not be able to run? Like I think it's adult programming that wouldn't be able to run. What other programming wouldn't be able to run if we were running at the 1/3 capacity?
Through the chair to the mayor, yeah, it would just be the adult users at the arena. And then I suppose any events in the drill hall, they would have to follow the 3rd capacity or have their own REP.
And what, that would also have an impact on Iceman games as well?
Yeah, so the Icemen would have to limit their capacity in the stands to 1/3.
And what about players on the ice over the age of 18?
Well, for the Icemen, they did get special permission to play because they have a mix of players who are under 18 and a few who are over 18.
Okay, so we wouldn't be able to have senior league hockey. We would have to limit capacity at Iceman games to 1/3.
That's correct.
And then any of the rentals through the drill hall would be limited to capacity or limited to who you could rent to?
Yeah, it would be limited to who we could rent to. If it was any adult sports, then that would not be able to happen. And then if it was like a private rental, they would have to implement their own REP or abide by the 30% or 3rd capacity, sorry.
And if they're 12 to 18, you don't have to follow the 1/3 capacity limit? Or you don't have to show, like, does that still take effect for the capacity? If they're within that age group that doesn't have to show vaccination or negative test?
Correct. So if you're operating under the other guidelines, so like the 3rd capacity, then there is no showing of vaccination record.
But you still have to operate at 1/3 capacity, even if they wouldn't have to show their vaccine records under the REP program.
Correct.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Then just through to Natasha, through the mayor. Natasha, if the Icemen had a game and they chose to have their own security, then they could have more than 1/3.
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, yes, I suppose if they wanted to implement their own REP program, they could. We did reach out to the health inspector to ask that very question. And it does come down, like the liability comes down on the facility owner. So if it was found out that users were not abiding by the REP program, it would fall back on the city potentially.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
To the amendment. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. So now we need to vote on the motion because it's just including the civic building, right? And then we can have another motion. to talk about that. Essentially, we have to vote on that motion again, just because we had it split. It's the same motion. It's just now becoming the motion. No, I think it would run the same as what the amendment was. We can just run that as the actual motion. No. So the amended motion can be the one that, the amended motion can be the motion now. Same question as the motion on the floor. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Councilor Nielsen.
I would like to move that council directs administration to operate the Manluck Center without REP security as a pilot project for 2 weeks. And could I speak to that?
Yeah, just let Karen get caught up with the motion.
Correct.
So just running the REP without security.
That is correct. For 2 weeks.
Without security.
With an opportunity, sorry, with an opportunity, without security, with an opportunity to review next council meeting. With an opportunity to review at the next council meeting.
Moved by Councilor Nielsen. Any discussion? Councilor Nielsen.
So the rationale in my little brain here is that unlike the civic building, the Manlock Center has 2 stations for monitoring people coming into the facility. One is the main desk for the aquatic center, and one is upstairs, the weight center, which I understand is staffed. And we have had a number of weeks where we have set some expectations in our community for having REPs in place. And I'd like to see our staff attempt to operate that for 2 weeks. And so we're not adding additional costs, and see what transpires. One of the alternative motions was to use existing staff to act as security. But we weren't concerned about them having any repercussions as staff members to act as security. So as part of the process to get into this aquatic center and or the weight center, our staff would simply say, could you provide your REP and go from there. And if we have all sorts of issues with that, then I guess we'd review it and re-examine it in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Councilor Everly.
Through the mayor to all of council, my recommendation would be not to move forward with this amendment. As a person who works in the public right now, also following the REP program, it is difficult all the time. People are difficult all the time. They walk away. They get mad at you, even into something as simple as a museum. It is anger that I do not like putting my staff through, and I don't like being through it myself. It is something I would not want to see on city staff in general when they're already trying to work through this time at the Manluck. Thank you.
Councilor Blatz.
Yeah, so when this was first brought forward about security for the Manluck Center, I specifically heard from quite a number of the Manluck Center staff who were extremely concerned for their safety and their well-being, and a lot of them were just burnt out already from opening and closing constantly, and then they had to listen to people screaming at them on the phone, people screaming at them as soon as they walk into the building. And that is a lot to ask of staff members that are between the ages of being in their teen years to being in their early 20s to take on this extra task of now you have to mediate people. And I don't want to put any of the staff members at risk of any form of harassment or abuse. And I think that it is too early to say that we should try and trial security for 2 weeks. Or trial without security for 2 weeks. I think that waiting until February, where things really had time to settle down, I think is wise to continue until February.
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. Through the chair. The cost of this is $36,000. Now I know up to $36,000. And I know that this would just be for 2 weeks. Anytime you go into any restaurant, I've yet to see one that has private security. Anytime I've gone to places where I have to show my proof of vaccination, I've yet to use private security. I'm not sure why the city is different, other than we seem to be okay with spending $36,000 on it. Or have the ability to spend $36,000.
Councilor Nielsen.
I guess part of my motion is based on Natasha's comments that they've had two issues, is what she said. We've had 2 significant issues there. And I guess I'm concerned about spending potentially $36,000 to address 2 issues. And that's not to say there might not be more, but that's why I also said, let's have a look at it in 2 weeks' time as well. I mean, if it was reported that we've had a major problem, then I guess you can have a different motion forward. But to my knowledge, we've not been informed, contrary to what council's concerns were, or not council's, the staff's concerns were, they didn't want to be yelled at, they didn't want to have these things happen to them. I have not had a report that says they have been, or that the security person has been, other than 2 incidences. So that's the reason for the motion.
Councillor Everly.
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, my question to that would be pure volume, right? A restaurant is coming in and having at most, I don't know how many sittings, but a few sittings a night where they're at the table. You can have the things checked there doing those ways where it's day in, day out at the Manlock. And even if it's not a violent where you might report it, it's the consistent sigh, huff, right? Do we have to do this again? Not again. And it's that it continues to gradually build on that employee throughout the day. So while they're also doing other things, I think it's that consistent volume where it's negativity all day long. And so we're paying somebody out front, and that's their job. Security is to be, it's not a city staff member that's also being asked to do then a program later where they're working with the public.
So then my question to
Yeah.
you is, as the director at the museum, why aren't you spending $36,000 for security there?
Because I don't have anywhere near the volume that the aquatic center does. If I have 5 people come through my door today, so it's a little bit different at the museum, because if you're in any of the any of my retail areas, I cannot put in the REP program. So it's only people that are crossing my retail and into my galleries. So that's at most 5 people a day that we're questioning that. That's not continual action on a person to be negatively impacted continually all day.
But I would argue that a place like Boston Pizza and or Huckleberry's would have a similar type volume to the Manlock Center. They would drive through 80 customers a day.
Generally speaking, it's not one person. A sit down at the table, so your dinner takes an hour. Your server comes up, they check your passport or whatever we want to call it, because it's not a passport. And that's multiple times. You have a break in an hour. A person sitting at the table, it's repetitive action. That is a repetitive negativity on them. So it's building into the other. Yeah, that's that repetitive one place. I don't know what the volume is at the Manlock at any given time, but 20 people all at once that are reacting that way.
Councillor Blancs.
So further to the explanation that Councillor Nielsen gave as to why he wanted this motion, was more or less, my response is that I'm more so looking at staff well-being, burnout, and retention. So my fear would be losing staff members to burnout or emotional well-being being damaged. I think that the city spending the money that they are to fund private security is setting a precedent that the city cares about our staff's mental well-being and is further trying to retain the staff that we do have with a staffing shortage in those fields. And so I think, to me, staff well-being and retention is more important than the money that we are spending for the next 4 months.
This meeting went longer than I thought it would. We've got 2 more agenda items after this. One is extremely quick, the other one not so much. Does anybody want supper ordered? Carry on. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Natasha. Natasha, approximately how many people go through the Manlock Center in a month? Just a ballpark. Is it around 10,000?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, we average about 80 patrons a day.
80 a day, so 2,400. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm with Councillor Blatz. I think that our staff need to feel safe. I think they need to feel secure. I don't think anybody wants to go to work and they think they dread going to work. We're already challenged with staffing, especially at the pool. And so if they quit or we can't maintain staff, we're going to have to pay overtime. And then if we get new staff, we're going to have to pay cost of training. So I realize that it is $36,000 up to a maximum of $36,000. But I feel very strongly that we have safety as our priority for all of our staff. So I would just like to see us go ahead with this. Thank you.
Yeah, and in the absence of whether we get new staff or not, or we're paying overtime, we're going to be closing the pool again for shorter hours if we don't have the staff to cover off those shifts anyways. So I agree, and I think it's sad that anybody, and I would put anybody in this position or that might be in this position, that it's sad that they have to deal with decisions made by other orders of government, and they get treated like it's their fault or they're the one that made that decision. And I don't like spending $36,000 or even $65,000 on security. But I also don't want somebody coming to work not feeling safe or feeling like they're going to be bullied or harassed at work because of a decision made by another order of government. So this council had two decisions. We could operate at 1/3 capacity or we could operate under the REP. We made the decision to operate under the REP in the best interest of the city. Have a staff member have to endure that harassment or being bullied by a member of the public is unacceptable. And it's, again, sad that we have to spend $65,000 on security. But I would rather that than having a staff member feel like they felt unsafe at work or felt like they needed to take that type of harassment. So I agree with Councillors Elliott, Blatz, and Everly on not supporting this and making sure that we've got security in place. Anything further? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Somebody have a subsequent motion? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that City Council approve to a maximum of $35,856 for private security to continue operating the restrictions exemption program, the REP, from November 8th, 2021 to February 28th, 2022, to be funded from the contingency reserve.
Moved by Councillor Elliott. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Oh, man. Amendments. Can I do amendments? What's that? Yes, we're gonna have some, let's do a 10-minute break.
Recess. It's recess.
You have your tetherball? Welcome back from the mayor's imposed recess. Item 8C. council support for AUMA VP nomination, vice president nomination. So this is me asking council to make a motion to support my nomination for vice president with AUMA. It is a requirement of the nomination, submitting nomination papers, that I get support of my council. Councillor Elliott.
I would move that city council supports Mayor Gandam in filing nomination papers for the position of vice president on the AUMA board.
Moved by Councillor Elliott. Any questions? Councillor Nielsen.
How do you view, how does our community benefit from this role over your last one?
It wouldn't be I don't think the benefit changes. I think my involvement with the association grows. My skill level improves and my increased level of communication and raising the profile of our city does. So I would be making more, I would have more communication to the press, and I would be Tyler Gandam, Mayor of the City of Wetaskiwin, Vice President for cities of 8 or for cities under 500,000. So again, I don't think it changes the level of how it benefits the community. It just continues to benefit the community in that role, and having more, potentially more minister time as well through my role as Vice President.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
I wish you luck in your election.
Thank you. Just after coming out of that last election, thinking I never want to go through another election. Anything else? We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you for your support, and I appreciate that. Item 8D, a homelessness update from Mr. Paul Edginton.
Thank you.
I just.
Thank you.
Good evening, council. I'm here this evening to provide an update on the winter emergency shelter and the work that administration has been doing, both with community members and agencies in the community, as well as other levels of government. So just some history. On September 13th, council provided direction for the setup and operations of a fenced encampment to act as a temporary warming shelter 24/7 until March 31st, 2022. And on September 27th, council provided further direction approving a motion to create a winter shelter advisory committee to help oversee the startup and operations of a proposed shelter. On October 25th, administration provided a verbal update. During that presentation, we introduced the partnership with Maskwacis Tribal Council. We provided an update on grant and lobbying efforts, an update on our commitment to reaching out to potential shelter operators, identify potential costs of private security options, in-kind donation requests, proposed agreement between the GOA and an approved shelter provider. We provided an update on a successful grant award of $150,000 from the Reaching Homes federal funding. Council approved a motion during this meeting to start spending that $150,000 upon a receipt of a commitment letter from the Rural Development Network, which we have received. Since that date, we've reached out to both the proposed shelter provider and the Rural Development Network to better understand the operational requirements. In those discussions, we learned that the proposed shelter would accommodate a minimum of 20 users plus staff and would require a minimum of 4 toilets. On October 29th, members of the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee spoke specifically around the urgency around a solution in Wetaskiwin and urged the city to start pursuing alternative options in case a trailer solution could not be found. It was during this discussion that administration or I should say the Winter Emergency Shelter Advisory Committee was able to form 2 volunteer working groups. One working group was devoted their time to scouring the province for an appropriate trailer system, given the operational requirements noted above. And the other team devoted their time and energy to reviewing all potential locations to place a shelter in an existing facility somewhere within the community in the event that the trailer system could not be procured. So I'd like to provide an update on both of the work of those working groups and then just some next steps. So it was, I think, early last week, where Alberta Health Services connected our administration to a company that was able to help procure a solution that met all of the minimum requirements from the proposed shelter operator. At the time of this presentation, this administration has met with the provider on site to discuss the proposed encampment and to ensure that the solution is suitable and within the budget approved by council. We are continuing to work closely with this provider, as well as AHS, GOA, the proposed shelter operator, and RDN to ensure that we can start to finalize this deal. The working group or the working team was also able to identify a small number of alternate trailer options that exist, but it should be noted that they would need to be sourced individually, which would significantly increase the amount of time to bring a trailer solution to fruition. It should be noted that if administration is unable to finalize the above noted trailer solution, that there are no alternative options given the time remaining to get a viable shelter in place. Something that we've learned through the last few weeks is that trailers are currently in high demand with the increasing demand of the oil and gas sector, as well as that these oil companies need to provide encampments that are adhering to AHS standards, thus increasing the demand and costs for said trailers. That's an update on the trailer encampment and the work that has happened there. I want to provide another update on the alternate locations within the city and region. It was on November 2nd of last year that we presented existing civic facilities that could be utilized to host a 24/7 integrated response hub. These options included the Civic Building, Drill Hall, and Memorial Arts Center specifically. Since that, the year has passed and administration has noted another option, including an unused waste and recycling office. However, we'd only be able to provide about 50% of the capacity required to serve the vulnerable population. Administration recognizes that while these are less than ideal locations, these facilities could, in theory, be repurposed to accommodate an overnight winter shelter. The working team conducted an exhaustive search of alternate facilities within the community. Was able to identify only one option, a church located at 5801 52nd Street. In discussions with member of the working team, the basement of this church could be utilized for an overnight winter shelter. We would just need to give them 2 days turnaround. The working team continues to follow up with other locations and facilities in town, and will continue to update the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee if any new leads materialize. Working team has also discussed opportunities within the region. However, at the time of writing, we are not aware of any that exist for this winter. So next steps, administration will continue to work on procuring a trailer encampment that meets the proposed shelter operator's minimum requirements for an overnight winter shelter, as well as meets the requirements outlined as part of council's original motion. And administration will continue to work with the Advisory Winter Shelter Committee and the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness to continue exploring alternate options to provide winter emergency shelter for the city's vulnerable population. And before I conclude, I would like to recognize over the last 3 months that administration has not been alone at the table to conduct this work, that we have been surrounded by professionals, subject matter experts, and community members that feel very strongly in regards to this file. I'd like to recognize the Winter Shelter Advisory Committee, which is a committee of council and is combined of professionals with subject matter expertise in shelter, medical services, and policing services. I'd like to recognize the volunteers with the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness, specifically those that have been extremely involved over the past 3 months. I'd like to recognize Sue and Tom Newman for taking a leadership role on the 2 working groups we spoke about. Sue taking a leadership on the community facilities search, and Tom Newman taking a lead on the trailer encampment search. I'd like to recognize Nat Pierce, Jesse Hanks, Arnold Van Oss, Christina Aguilar, and Azir Johnson for their commitment over the past 3 months specifically, and their dedication to working with administration to help move this work forward. I'd like to recognize our partnership with AHS, specifically Dr. Thera Kumar, Sherry Allen, and Carla Predinger, who have been routinely meeting with administration to help solve these issues. I'd like to recognize partnership with Government of Alberta, specifically the Ministry of Community and Social Services, Janet Monahan and Sharon Blackwell, both within that the shelter funding area, have been instrumental to helping us move this forward. And lastly, our partnership with Wetaskiwin and FCSS, who without their help and their commitment would make a lot of these community development and community building efforts a little bit more difficult. So I would like to recognize those individuals and the journey we have been on specifically since August. And with that, I can answer any questions council might have.
For a motion to accept this information or a motion as you see fit.
I move that City Council receive the report titled Winter Emergency Shelter Update dated November the 8th, 2021 as information.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion? Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you. Through the chair. So sourcing trailers individually or however you stated their fault, making things a little more complex. If we were to start tomorrow, how soon can we have trailers in place? How soon can we have them in place? And then the second question is, how soon can we be operationalized to use that facility?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen. So the work that we are currently doing with a trailer vendor in the province, and that's the encampment that I'm referencing here in my report, that solution. So in meeting with them this morning, if we were to finalize the deal and all the details, which we're still in the process of doing, but when we finalize that, it will take them approximately 5 days to get to site with all the materials, and another 5 days from being on site to having completed it, and then the doors able to be open, and then a shelter operator being able to operate out of there.
So that's the best case scenario.
As best case scenario, given the information we received this morning, it's 10 days from contract sign off to doors are open.
And in the event we can't hit best case scenario, as the weather starts to plummet, temperature starts to plummet, do we have consideration for any other alternatives at this point in time?
So through the mayor to Councillor Nelson, there's the situation goes sideways and for example, that it delays, what have you, assuming that the trailers that we're currently looking at have their own water and wastewater built right in and they're insulated. So the need to go ahead and start digging utility connections to the trailers is not necessarily required. The only requirement I believe that we need is a generator, which isn't necessarily something we need to tie into, something we need to bring on site. And so I'm not sure that moving into colder temperatures is going to significantly impact us because the site's on a dead end roadway. We can clear it, we can place things, we can get things up and running. So my concerns aren't so much the temperature. In the event that the whole thing falls through, there is no other existing facility or location identified by council at this time where a winter overnight shelter could operate.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Paul. Paul, have any of the local churches stepped forward as potential temporary sites until such time as everything was in place?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott. The proposed shelter operator has reached out to the ministerial and a number of churches in the community. To our knowledge, there is only one church available, and it was the one that was listed in the report at 5801 52nd Street. We've been told, I believe that is overseen by the Lighthouse Church, that we've been told that they just need 2 days to kind of get everything sorted and then we could be in there.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Paul, just for clarification, so right now, the way the motion reads, we would then get these trailers and it will be ran by private security, is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley. So as the motion on September 13th reads, yes, what administration has been directed to set up a trailer encampment and then to have private security to essentially ensure that everybody is safe, nobody gets hurt, and that individuals have a warm place to find themselves over the cold winter nights. That is the initial intent of that motion. Since the motion was made, and because it's taken us a long time to find the trailers, we've identified that, or we've learned that administration was funded $150,000 from the Reaching Homes grant. It was around that same time that we learned that the government of Alberta was interested in operationally funding a government of Alberta approved shelter provider. And then the third one is that it was during that time that we learned that there was a proposed shelter operator that was willing to come in and to oversee it. And so the initial intent of council's motion on September 13th is to, as you've mentioned, move forward with private security and just have it be a warm place. But because all these pieces are kind of coming together and the trailer has taken a while, all this other piece has been being moved forward and is now in existence. And so we have made council aware of that as we've progressed. And I'm not exactly sure as to where the agreement between the GOA and that proposed shelter operator, whether or not that will happen or not. Administration still continues to try to procure the trailer solution and meet the intent of council's motion.
So could you give me or us an update then of where we're at with the private security? Because if they can be here in 10 days, as that private security is, I mean, it's one thing to have the buildings there and the doors open. Do we have the ability to have this private security to do that within those 10 days, best case scenario?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, we have a good relationship with a number of private security providers in town, and currently are using one provider for regular patrols around the existing encampment and then the business area. The one thing we wouldn't have in that regard at this point in time is any funding for the private security. I'd have to go back to the Rural Development Network and see if we're able to use any of that $150,000 and use that for private security, or whether or not they'd consider that operating. If it is operating, the only funding that's going to approve for this as of yet is the $150,000 from the Rural Development Network for capital. And so I'd have to have that conversation with them to get some clarification.
Done. No, that's okay.
I just want to make sure Councillor Billingsley is finished.
Yes, go ahead.
Just through the mayor to Paul, just two things. Paul, is AHS involved in any way?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott. To date, administration is not aware of AHS's involvement in regards to the specific trailer encampment.
And secondly, could it be that city council and administration direct the RCMP to be patrols once in a while too, that it just becomes part of a routine that they, not full-time security, but that they make it part of their rural watch?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, my understanding is the inspector during his monthlies does come in and have those conversations. Currently, the RCMP are doing daily checks through the existing encampment, so I don't think it would be much of a stretch to ask them to switch from the existing encampment if it moves to the trailer. I think that's something we could figure out.
subsequent to that, do they also do nightly checks or just daily?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, I receive reports weekly from the RCMP. I don't, part of those reports, the timing of when they do those patrols isn't made clear to me, so I'd have to ask for that information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. I've seen RCMP vehicles out there in the evening, and not that I'm out all that late, but definitely in the evening, I've seen them out there. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you. Just through the chair, actually to Paul. I don't want this to be left missed. So in your initial presentation, you gave a lot of compliments and kudos and statements of appreciation to a number of people. And I would just like to express mine, and I believe council's appreciation for the work that you and your staff have done to navigate these crazy waters at crazy times. And so thank you for all you've done and for keeping us in the loop.
To the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, I'll take it. Thank you very much.
You get a hug later.
I was going to say, in the absence of a hug, a nice pat on the back.
To the mayor, I just would like to provide some clarification on Councillor Billingsley's earlier question around private security. So the funding that was provided through Wetaskiwin FCSS to fund the staffing and training component of the 24/7 hub up until August 10th of this year is still available. There's still a significant amount of money there. So I will connect with the Wetaskiwin FCSS executive director to see if that funding could be made available specifically for private security. But then if you look to the motion, there's a lot in there regarding staffing and training. So that will be something we'll be following up with specifically.
Councillor Aberley.
Through the mayor to anybody who knows the answer, because I'm not 100% sure where this would go. It's my understanding when this original motion was made, everything was based on funding. Has any of that funding come through?
Through the mayor to Councillor Haberle, when this motion was made, the only funding that we knew that we had available was the funding through Wetaskiwin FCSS that they had received through mental health and wellness. And that exact funding was used to support the 24/7 shelter up until August 10th of this year. So what we didn't have was any of the capital funding. Since then, we've received $150,000 from the Rural Development Network for the Reaching Homes funding, which is federal funding. We have not yet received any additional funding.
So just so I can clarify, we would have trailers, but no money for, and I know it's a long, but no money to build the fence, no money to bring in the security company, no money for the training.
Through the mayor, Councillor Aberle, we're still in the process of negotiating the deal for the trailers. So we're getting pretty close where I believe we can come to an agreement for the trailer encampment, which would have the water and the wastewater. So no need for the expensive utilities that we initially thought we would have. Under the $150,000. We're hoping we come underneath that, which would perhaps provide a bit more funding for the other pieces to it. The fencing specifically, I think, is the other infrastructure component required. Things like the first aid training, the Narcan training, the cultural sensitivity training, as well as the private security, noting the significant amount of funding that held by Wetaskiwin FCSS, perhaps is an option. We would need to clarify specifically through that grant to see whether or not that's an appropriate use. At this point in time, we are very close to being able to do the majority of it with the grants that we've obtained. And if we are unable to do so, and that becomes a major blockage, we would come back to council and have a conversation.
When I made this motion in September, I was extremely confident that we would have zero issues with having this done, especially because of the funding that was assured to me by two other organizations in a meeting on August 25th. So I would have bet big money that there was no issues other than the fact that we needed to get this set up. And securing the security and the training and to have that in place. So while I hear all of council's frustrations and applaud administration to be working through this very, very well and securing the partnerships throughout the province, as well as our community members that are working tirelessly on this, I'm extremely frustrated in the funding that was assured to me that hasn't come through. Councilor Nielsen.
So I just want to be clear, sorry, through the chair to Paul. So the $150,000 is rental of trailers.
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, at this point in time, the agreement that we are negotiating or trying to finalize is, yes, they are rental of trailers until the end of March 2022.
So on end of March, those trailers will be wheeled out of here potentially.
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, yes, potentially. That's where we are. All the preparations and planning is just to get us to the end of March 2022. And unless we were directed otherwise, they would be wheeled out of here and returned.
And so effective March, we begin the journey potentially all over again.
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Paul. Paul, when we hire a security company, do the members of the security company not come with some qualifications like first aid and other types of training that we may not have to train them?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, they perhaps might. We just haven't ventured down those conversations yet with private security company to know what training they have, what training they might not have. And so we would still need to go look at the reality of what's available to us in procuring a said solution, and then figure out what costs are required moving forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. My inclusion of that in my original motion was based on the number of calls that we've had requiring Narcan. So that was important to me to make this motion go forward. Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried.
I move to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Blatz. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much. I was saying earlier that I'd be out a lot of money if I was trying to decide